What if I told you South Africa isn't 100 years old, or 400, or even 20,000? What if I told you the real story of this country begins 3.5 million years ago? This place isn't just a cradle of humankind, it is the cradle. But here's the twist: the story of its people is that everyone is an immigrant, from the very first humans 200,000 years ago to the most recent arrivals. This isn't one origin story, it's a 10-part, 3 million-year-old story of collisions, migrations, and a brutal battle for the land at the end of the world. And it all starts in a cave. All right, so when you think origin story, you're probably thinking, I don't know, 1652 when the Dutch showed up, right? That's wrong by like a few million years. To find the real origin, you have to go about 50 kilometers northwest of Johannesburg to a place that is no joke called the Cradle of Humankind. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And get this, that's not just a cute name. It's a fact. 40% of the entire world's human ancestor fossils have been found right here. This is it. This is ground zero. These caves, they're like the planet's messy attic, and it's full of our family albums. In the 1930s, scientists pulled a 2.3 million-year-old fossil from these caves. They nicknamed her Mrs. Pless. She was an Australopithecus africanus, one of our most famous and earliest ancestors. For decades, she was the star of the show. But these caves held another, much stranger secret. See, nearby in a different cave system, a team was exploring and they found a chamber so deep, so narrow, that they almost missed it. And inside, it wasn't one fossil or a dozen, it was 1,500 fossil specimens. This wasn't Australopithecus, it was something new. They called it Homo naledi. This was and is the most extensive discovery of a single hominid species ever found in Africa. This land wasn't just on the path of human evolution, it was a literal laboratory for it. It was birthing entirely new branches of our family tree. But okay, Homo naledi, Mrs. Pless, these are our ancestors, our relatives. They're not the people of South Africa. So, who were the first Homo sapiens, the first us, to walk this land? Meet the San. The San people are, and this is not an exaggeration, among the oldest cultures on Earth. We're not talking 2,000 or 10,000 years. A 2016 DNA study showed that the ancestors of today's San hunter-gatherers began to diverge from all other human populations about 200,000 years ago. They were the first, the originals. For thousands of years, they were the only Homo sapiens in all of southern Africa. They were hunter-gatherers. They left us tens of thousands of clues, these incredible rock art sites all over the country. But their entire way of life, which had been successful for 100,000 years, was about to be changed forever. Because about 2,000 years ago, a new group of people arrived, and they were just the first wave. What's coming next is a 2,000-year story of collisions. We're about to trace every major migration that built this nation. Herders, farmers, sailors, and slaves. It's a massive, complex, and honestly unbelievable story. We're a new channel, and this is part 1 of a 10-part mega series. If you love history that's way more complex and way more interesting than what you learned in school, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. It tells us you want more deep dives just like this, and frankly, it helps us keep the lights on so we can make them. Alright, I want you to think of South Africa like a layer cake. The bottom layer, the bedrock, is the San. But a lot of layers got piled on top fast. Layer 1, the herders versus the hunters, the Khoekhoe San collision. The first new layer, the Khoekhoe. They arrive about 2,000 years ago. Now this is a massive shift. The San were hunters. The Khoekhoe were herders. This is the first time the concept of owning animals, of pastoralism, enters the region. And right away, you have a collision of lifestyles. The hunter-gatherer lifestyle is now in direct competition with the pastoralist lifestyle for land and water. This is the first great collision. Layer 2, the iron-wielding farmers, the Bantu Expansion. This next one, this isn't a wave, it's a tsunami. It's called the Bantu Expansion, and it is one of the most important events in all of human history. It's a millennia-long series of migrations that, get this, transformed the entire linguistic, economic, and cultural composition of sub-Saharan Africa. Starting from West Central Africa, about 4,000, 5,000 years ago, these groups of farmers spread out. They had a massive technological advantage. They brought iron smelting. They brought new crops. They brought huge new social structures. By 300 CE, they had reached modern-day KwaZulu-Natal. By 500 CE, they were in the Limpopo province. And what happened when they met the Khoi and San? They assimilated and displaced them. This is the origin of the great Bantu-speaking nations of South Africa, the Zulu, the Xhosa, the Sotho, the Tswana, and many more. For the next 1,000 years, this is the status quo, a complex, powerful, and evolving landscape of indigenous African kingdoms. And then, in 1652, a completely new kind of ship appears on the horizon. Layer 3, the Tavern Keepers, the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, the most powerful mega-corporation on Earth, had zero intention of starting a colony. So, why did they stop? To plant a garden. I'm serious. The 10-month journey from Europe to the East Indies, modern Indonesia, was brutal. Sailors were dying of scurvy. They needed a refreshment outpost, a place to get fresh water, fruit, and vegetables. Cape Town was founded to be a supply stop, a galactic-level truck stop. They even had a nickname for it, the Indische Sea Herberg, the Tavern of the Indian Ocean. A simple garden, right? But that garden, that simple tavern, would lead directly to the next two waves of migration and the first South African slaves. Layers 4 and 5, the unwilling immigrants, the slaves. How? Well, who was going to work the garden? The Dutch settlers, the free burghers, needed cheap labor to run this tavern. So the VOC used its other trade routes. They started importing political exiles and slaves from the places they already controlled, the Dutch East Indies, modern Indonesia, Malaysia. These were the Cape Malays. At the exact same time, the VOC brought slaves from India, Bengal, South India. Over 50% of all slaves at the Cape in the 17th and 18th centuries were Indian. So the refreshment station directly created a new enslaved population. But this wasn't the last wave of Indian migration. Not by a long shot. Fast forward 150 years, the British are in control now. And in the 1860s, in the colony of Natal, they have a new, brutal cash crop, sugarcane. They needed cheap labor, so they looked to another British colony, India. Between 1860 and 1911, the British brought 152,000 indentured Indian laborers to Natal. It was a new form of slavery. Today, their descendants make up the largest population of people of Indian descent on the entire African continent. All of it stems from that original garden. Layer 6, the human buffer zone, the 1820 settlers. Okay, so the layer cake is getting really complex, but the British aren't done. It's 1820. Britain has two problems. Problem 1, the Napoleonic Wars just ended. They have massive unemployment at home. problem too. In the Cape Colony, they have a disputed frontier in the east where the colony collides with the Khoekhoe people. Their solution? They'll solve both problems at once. They use a government scheme to send 4,000 poor British settlers to the Eastern Cape. The official story? We're giving you free farms. The real story? They were creating a human buffer zone. The plan was to use these 4,000 civilians as a human shield to defend the eastern frontier against the Khoekhoe. But the plan failed spectacularly. Why? Because the British, in their infinite wisdom, sent artisans, shoemakers, blacksmiths, city dwellers with no interest in rural life. The farms were hit with droughts. The settlers hated it. So what did they do? They abandoned their farms and fled to the nearest towns like Grahamstown and Port Elizabeth. In the process, they accidentally created the first major English-speaking cities in the region. Layer 7, the Rebellion, the Great Trek. So, the British are here, they're making new rules, and the original Dutch-speaking settlers, the Boers, which just means farmers, are furious. They're furious about the British language, British laws, and especially the future abolition of slavery. So, in 1835, they decide, fine, we'll leave. We'll start our own migration. This is the Great Trek. It was a full-on rebellion, a mass migration of 12,000 people looking for a promised land where they could create their own free and independent state. But this promised land was not empty. It was the land of the Ndebele, and it was the land of the Zulu. This collision is the final one, and it leads directly to one of the most famous, bloody, and foundational battles in all of South African history. The Voortrekkers, the Trekkers, push into the land of the powerful Zulu, King Dingane. After a delegation of Voortrekkers, led by Piet Retief, is, to put it mildly, massacred, the rest of the Trekkers are terrified. They are outnumbered, deep in the hostile territory, so they make a vow. They make a vow to God. If he delivers them, they will build a church and honor that day forever. On December 16th, 1838, a group of about 500 Voortrekkers in a lager, a circle of wagons, are attacked by a Zulu army of 15,000 to 20,000 warriors. It is a slaughter, but not for the trekkers. The Zulu army, armed with spears, charges into the cannons and guns of the Boers. By midday, it's over. Over 3,000 Zulus are dead. Only 3 Voortrekkers are wounded. The Khoekhoe River is said to have run red with blood, which is why it is known to this day as the Battle of Blood River. For the Voortrekkers, this isn't just a victory, it's proof. It's divine proof that God is on their side, that he wants them to have this land. This battle becomes the foundational myth of the Afrikaner people. And it works. They create their independent states, the Orange Free State and the Transvaal. So, by the late 1800s, the layer cake is set. You have the British Cape Colony, the British Natal Colony, the Boer Transvaal Republic, and the Boer Orange Free State Republic. After more war, the Anglo-Boer War, which is a whole nother story, the British finally conquer the Boer republics, and in 1910 they decide to merge them. This is it. This is the birth of the modern country. They call it the Union of South Africa. But this union was, as one historian put it, born and raised in sin. It was a compromise, a deal, and it had an original sin baked right into its DNA. Why? 1. It was racist. The compromise guaranteed that all black South Africans were excluded from political power. 2. It was imperialist. It was a deal by the British for the British to protect their gold mining interests in Johannesburg. 3. It was capitalist in the worst way. The entire system was designed to create one thing: forced, cheap, black labor. This led directly to the 1913 Land Act, which we'll get to that. So the origin of the country isn't a single moment. It's a 3.5 million year old story of an ancient land populated by wave after wave after wave of people: San, Khoekhoe, Bantu, Dutch, Malay, Indian, British. Each wave collided with the last, and it all culminated in a union that wasn't a union at all, but the legal foundation for a century of division. So that is how the country was born. But what about the language? Next time, we dive into the oldest sound in human history and the story of a secret language written in Arabic that became the very soul of the oppressor. You don't want to miss Part 2. If this video gave you an aha moment, hit that like button and tell us in the comments, what's the one part of this 3 million year history that blew your mind the most? Subscribe for Part 2. Thanks for watching.